Hello everyone and welcome to AndyDavo's Guide to Imperial Nobility in Blood Bowl 3. In this video I'm going to cover the players that make up the team and how they work both individually and collectively, how to level up the team so you've got an effective team when you go on the pitch, some optimal starting rosters and the different choices you're actually able to make, overall game strategy and how you can get the best out of Imperial Nobility on the pitch, setups both defensively and offensively, and we'll talk about some reasoning and why I came to those conclusions, and then also we'll cover off some inducements and what choices you've got and what you should be looking to take. I think before we dive in, I just want to give you a quick introduction to Imperial Nobility. And for me, the Imperial Nobility team in Blood Bowl 3 are a little bit of a mashup between humans and Bretonnians from Blood Bowl 2. They excel as a defensive team because they've got the ability to create considerable problems for opponents on defense because they've got so many control skills. They are, however, quite expensive. They lack a solid throwing game because they're relying on agility 3, and they've also got both average speed and average movement broadly across the board. We can summarise this and say that overall they're a great defensive team, starting with both stand firm and fend on a bunch of players, a bit like the old Bretonnian team. They've got a good number of starting skills, so they're quite good, but unfortunately in the weaknesses column the roster is incredibly expensive, even more so than Bretonnians from the previous game. It's also on a AV 8 plus or 9 plus now, so it's not very durable, and the team isn't particularly fast or agile. Okay, before we look at the players and how we're going to progress them, I think it's worth covering the level up experience in Blood Bowl 3 and how it's altered against older versions of the game. In Blood Bowl 3, the level up process, you can now select from normal skills, double skills, stats, or you can random. However, they all cost different variant amounts of star player points. So taking a normal skill is a lot cheaper than taking a double skill, and a stat is even more expensive. During the randoming of level ups, you can select a player a level up for about half the normal cost. However, what you're getting is complete pot luck. Now, on some player types, you really want to be following specific career types. But on some player types, it's okay to have quite a wide breadth of skills. I would strongly advise that on most positionals you avoid randoming, but on lineman type characters, it's probably okay. This of course goes thrown out the window if you just want to have a little bit of fun with a team and see what sort of weird and wonderful combinations you can come up with. So, let's go and dive in and have a quick look at the team. The Imperial Nobility team has 5 different players, the first of which is the Ogre. The Ogre is from the old human team. It's movement 5, strength 5, agility 4+, which means effectively agility 2 in the old world. It can pass, but it's terrible at it, and its armor 10+. All the skills are the same from the previous game, and it has access to strength skills as a primary, and it can also get secondary skills as general and agility, which means you've got open pro, block, dodge, if you really want to go down that route. Now, in terms of how I would level up the player, ideally you're thinking of Imperial Nobility team, you want to be using the Ogre as a roadblock rather than a blitzer. For me, in that mind, guard is probably still one of the strongest skills in the game, so I would take that. I would then also take stand firm. If you want to save up and take a secondary skill, block is the obvious skill you take straight away, and that is okay. I would still take guard first, and then possibly go block, then stand firm. If your player happens to level past that point, then both pro and defensive are really good skills because they're very strong in the current game. Pro, for example, will let you re-roll a failed bonehead about 2/3 of the time, and defensive is a brand new skill to Blood Bowl 3, and it turns off guard in your opponent's turn. So if you take a strength 5 guard player, push it into their players, and their guard doesn't work, he is now inflicting guard on potentially a lot of players, and he's a very, very, very good player. I don't think defensive is still better than block, but it is a skill that I will talk about a lot in a lot of the guides. I think it's that good. So next, we're going to go and look at the Bretonnian blitzer, or the noble blitzer, as it is here. This is a little bit like the old human blitzers, although it has catch, which a human blitzer does not. It is movement 7, strength 3, agility 3+, passing 4+, and AV 9+. So in old money, that's an AV 8 player. Has block and catch, and on primary skills has access to general skills, and agility skills, so it can easily get dodge as its first skill and become a block dodge player, but it can also take strength and passing skills if you want to do that. For me, Noble Blitzers are probably the best and most important players, starting with block and catch. They will probably become your initial ball carrier since it's quick, but I would avoid skilling one up into a ball carrier because you've got throwers, which we'll get to in a moment. Therefore, I think that skill choices, I will use them as blitzers. Dodge is an incredibly strong first pick, and at 6 points I would take that. You can then build them into harassment players, so you can take sidestep, tackle and diving tackle, and that player would become a real problem and nuisance for your opponent to deal with. Or you can go and lean into block, dodge, guard, and potentially break tackle, because now break tackle means they would dodge on a 2+. That's a very strong player, and I have seen people take Mighty Blow tackle and build them into an out-and-out blitzer, killer blitzer. I also think there's an awful lot of value in taking statistics, because taking movement, which is very likely, turns it into movement 8, and that makes it far faster than any other player you've got on the team. And if you can hit either strength or agility, then you can build the rest of the player around that stat. With that in mind, I think what I would actually do with 2 of them, if I started with a roster with 2, I would save star player points on one, I would take dodge on the other, and the saving is for a statistic, see what I get, and then build the rest of the player around that. One thing I absolutely want to just clarify though, please avoid taking random skills on this player. I really don't think the synergy is there, and there are so many good skill picks straight out the gate. So let's move on to bodyguards. Bodyguards, if you play Blood Bowl 2, you'll kind of recognise they are wrestle and stand firm as their primary, and I think the role of the bodyguard is to broadly get in the way and put them where you need them, and I think therefore the most important skill on that player is guard, so that you're able to fight back. This is effectively a strength 3 team, although it does have access to one big guy. I don't think that statistics are particularly valuable on this player. If we look at it, it's movement 6, strength 3, agility 3+, and AV 9+. Movement isn't going to really change much, and you're not really now finding either strength or agility particularly easily. For those of you who don't know, agility roll is now a D16, so you roll for a stat, you roll a D16. If you get a 15 or a 14 or a 15, you'll get agility, and on a roll of 16, you'll get strength. Anything below that is either movement, passing, or armor. So they are the 3 stats that are most likely to appear. I've covered that you should take guard. After that, I think break tackle, so you can put the player where you want to put it. It's got access to Mighty Blow on a normal skill, and I think in a league team, once I'd got guard everywhere and a smattering of break tackle, I would probably take some Mighty Blow so that I can fight a little bit. I also think saving up for both dodge and defensive are great skill picks, because they're going to be in base-to-base contact with your opponent. So dodge from a defensive point of view and defensive to turn off their guard makes a lot of sense. Again, I would strongly avoid randoming skills because guard, break tackle, mighty blow, dodge, defensive are all amazing skills. And so the next player we have is the Imperial Thrower. The Imperial Thrower starts with both pass and running pass, and running pass is a brand new skill. For those of you who've not seen it before, it means you can make a quick pass, and previously once you passed the ball you had to stop and wait in that square. That was the end of your turn. However, with running pass you can move a couple of squares, throw the ball, and then carry on until the end of your movement. And if you want to make go for it, you can. Now, please do bear in mind that the passing characteristic on this player is 3+, so it is exactly like the old human thrower. It is not particularly reliable. I would build this character into a thrower, and so with that in mind, I think block, leader, accurate, sure hands are all very strong primary skills, and then secondary skills, I think dodge and possibly even break tackle, but dodge first, are very strong. I would consider saving up for a statistic on this player, because I think movement is pretty strong, and I'm fishing for an agility increase, so I then don't need to take accurate on this player at all. They are not a strong thrower at the start of the game, and in fact they're just a glorified lineman really to start with. However, once they've picked up some star player points, I think they do shine, and I also think that Imperial Nobility really do need to field one or even both of the throwers at some point, and that is mostly because their linemen suck. So their linemen are movement 6, strength 3, which is all fine, agility 4+, so they can't dodge, that's agility 2 in the old game, passing 4+, and then they're AV 8+, which is old armor 7, and they are fend, so they are exactly the same as the yeoman from the previous game. And with that in mind, they only have very limited skill picks on primaries as well. They are a useful player to fill out a roster. They happen to come with one other valuable statistic, which is they cost very little, which on a very expensive team means you will be fielding a fair few of these at the start, but they will die. Now, I also think that there is several different career paths for the lineman. We need a dirty player, we need someone who can kick the ball, and then we need some players that can just stand in the way, so they need to take block or wrestle. Anytime you save up for a double skill, I think that should be guard, and I think that the players that get block, if they carry on progressing, you want to take guard, and if you have a dirty player, then I would potentially save up and take sneaky git as well. The one problem with taking sneaky git and dirty player on the same player is that this player then becomes quite expensive, and you want already an expensive roster, you won't be getting loads of inducements. With this in mind, because there are so many different potential career paths, first 2 or 3 players that do level, this is one where I do say I think you should random your first couple of skills, and then you build the rest of your roster around the missing pieces that you didn't get via randoming. Equally, if you random and get something really pointless, then you can just put that player in the line of scrimmage, and don't worry, in a few games time it won't be a problem for you. Next, I want to talk to you a little bit about strategy. We've done a little mini introduction to the team, but Imperial Nobility are a brand new team to Blood Bowl, and I think they specialise in an offensive, control-oriented game, and they use their positionals as a unit to contribute something overall. With that in mind, you want to be using the linemen to pin down opponents, but not early in a drive because they will die. You want to use the thrower as a sweeper, along with the blitzers, and the blitzers are nipping in on defense, hitting and running back, and your Ogre and your Bodyguards are the pivot around your defense. Do not let the lineman get hit in the first couple of turns, and then once you have blocked down the center and caused a problem, your opponent then has to push down the sideline, and I think at that point you can then swing across and shut people down, because you are movements 6 and 7. Getting from the center to one of the 2 flanks shouldn't be a problem. On offense, the team is also not particularly strong, and I would consider scoring on turn 5 or turn 6, and I'd much rather take a score and guarantee it rather than try and wait out until turn 8 where I don't actually score, because I would back this team on a defensive engagement so long as they've got a full 11 players. With that in mind, another piece of the strategy we need to make sure is that you've got to 12 or even 13 players pretty quickly, whereas some teams will play with only 11 between TB 1000 and 1400. I think Bretonians do actually need to pick up to, and probably even 13 players by about 1400 team value, and ideally as many of the positions as you can possibly get on the roster. Right, let's go and have a quick look at rosters. Okay, before we dive into roster building, we do need to cover a change in this rule set, and that is the difference between old fan factor and new fan factor and how it relates to the winnings roll. The winnings roll is now based on the following calculation. At the start of the match, both coaches roll a D3 and add their dedicated fans to the fan factor for the match. The total of all of that is then added together to determine the fan attendance. Your team winnings are half of the fan attendance plus 10k for every touchdown your team has scored. Now, broadly, that means that as a dedicated fan costs 10k and you're only making back 5k per game, the first 2 games you run at a loss, but by game 3, you're then making a profit of 5k a game. Now, whether you take dedicated fans, I think completely determines on the type of competition you're going to be entering, of which I can really think of 3. We've got Resurrection. You won't take any dedicated fans because your team normally stays exactly the same between game 1 and game 2 and game 3. So take no dedicated fans. Matchmaking, where you want to get off to a really good start typically, and therefore having as much team value in team and not in dedicated fans makes a lot of sense in some rosters, and therefore you might want to consider not taking it at all. And then in league play, where your team is your team and you really do want to pick up your players and you've probably got a longer term vision in mind, I would concentrate on picking up 3, 4, even 5 dedicated fans. So let's go and look at the first roster I've put together, and that is a balanced roster. I think it has 11 players, and we have 2 blitzers, who I think are the stars of the show, as we've covered earlier. We've got all 4 bodyguards here. We've got 1 thrower who you then use to carry the ball, and then we've got 4 linemen. And I've tried to keep the linemen to as few as possible because they're rubbish. We've only got 2 team rerolls, which is a little bit light. However, we do have a combination of 6 block and or wrestle across the team, so we're probably not needing to reroll too much other than ball pickups. And if we need to hand the ball off, we just take the throw and we hand it to a blitzer. We've only got 2 rerolls, but we do have 4 dedicated fans, so I think you can quite quickly get your cash together. I would initially save up for a 3rd reroll to make the roster a bit more reliable, then an ogre, and probably an apothecary, then an ogre. And that would take the first 6 or 7 games probably to get all of that stuff. Now you can swap all of the fans and a blitzer out, and you can pick an ogre up if you wish. I don't think that's a good idea, but it is a possibility. Right, let's look at the second roster. Here I've gone for a 3 reroll as the primary focus because that adds a little bit more stability. Unfortunately, we've had to pick up an extra lineman, and I've swapped out a bodyguard. It's also cost me a couple of dedicated fans, so we're going to be making less money overall. So we have 2 blitzers, 3 bodyguards, 1 thrower, and then 5 linemen. I don't think this roster is probably that strong. I much prefer the first roster, but it is an option that if you really want to be playing with 3 rerolls, then it just demonstrates what you've got to give up elsewhere to get that 3rd reroll in there. Now let's go and look at something else. I wanted to focus on getting the ogre into the team this time round as the primary consideration. So we have an ogre. I've also put both blitzers in there because actually I think they are the stars of the team, and I really want both blitzers in. That meant that I've only got 3 bodyguards. I've only got no throwers. I have no throwers, and again we've had to put 5 of the rubbish linemen into the team, and we're playing off 2 rerolls. Finally, we're playing off 2 dedicated fans, so we're not going to be generating very much money. And bearing in mind this time we need to be picking up a reroll, a thrower, and a bodyguard before we're anywhere near getting towards full strength. And ideally, a mature roster is actually running both of the throwers because they're a better armor class. So that's the 3rd roster. Leave a comment in the section below. Which roster are you going to take? Let's have a quick look at some setups. I've taken the roster 1, which was the no ogre build, as the baseline. Of course, if you've got an ogre, this is a little bit out of date, but you're probably putting the ogre on the line of scrimmage. So we'll start with offense. The thrower is at the back here. That's going to be fetching the ball. I've tried to protect us from a blitz on both sides. So we've got chevron players. These are linemen. We don't want them to be throwing blocks. I am protecting or having one of the bodyguards here. You can easily swap. So if you want a bodyguard as a safety and then the 4 linemen on the flanks, that works. I really think the other 5 are much of a muchness. You can also, just as a variant on this, if you want to try and protect yourself a little bit more, that's quite nice. That really does stop players running through too much. Although these players, if they're knocked down, will create a bit of a gap. The reason you can get away with a slight spread is because these players have got fend, so they will be stopping people run through. And if your opponent puts the assists in the wrong square, they might have to dodge. If you want to do something like that, I really think you actually want to be looking at doing something like this, which is stand firm, and therefore, instead of using fend, your opponent has to knock them over, and they're going to have to do a dodge. And with the new rules to blitz not allowing dodge skill or team rerolls, there is a chance that the blitz almost immediately fails. So that's quite a strong setup. I put the 5 players on the line of scrimmage. That's assuming that your opponent will be putting 3 players on the line of scrimmage in the centre. These 5 broadly follow your opponent around, so it's quite difficult to do an offensive setup without knowing how your opponent's set up in the first place. Key thing here is that the thrower is set slightly further back because fetching the ball and getting to the halfway line is key. So, right, let's look at some defensive setups, of which we have several. This is a pressure defense, and the first couple I'm going to show you are all pressure defenses, and they're all assuming that this is turn 1 of the game. Line of scrimmage, if we just introduce that first of all, I've put 3 the linemen on there, and then looking in the wide zones, I've put a bodyguard on this side and a bodyguard on this side. At this point, it doesn't matter whether your opponent has a frenzy player or not, because with stand firm, you're probably going to be safe unless they're running juggernaut. I've protected the thrower and one of the blitzers on the second rank. The thrower on this side isn't really going to be attacking down this side because they will have put 5 players across here, so the open space should be on our right as we look at it, and that's why there's a blitzer there and the other blitzer is there. If you are looking at this and thinking, well, I've left an awful lot of players open to be hit, you would be right, but if you think about it from your opponent's point of view, only really numbers 3, 5 and 6 are easy to get 2 dice on, where you don't then give away a free hit in return. 3 is a little bit more tricky to get at because of the line of scrimmage, so really you're left with numbers 5 and 6, and depending on what happens, if they attack numbers 5 or 6 and they don't knock him over, you might then be able to get a surf in turn 1 because there'll be something stood here and you might be able to blitz it and push it into the square, and then number 6 pushes it out. So I'm quite happy to leave players like that. If you want to go with a flatline defense, we'll show you that in just a second, but this should give you a lot of leeway to go and get round our right hand side and start putting pressure on the ball straight away. Here's an alternative pressure version. Really it's just chevrons, and again I've offset the line of scrimmage to try and give us as much space over here as possible. I'm hiding our blitzer here, and this is really just going to be used for a midpoint in the half defense where you don't want your opponent to be able to go and sneak down a side and set up for a 2 or 3 turn score. Here's a super aggressive defense. I wouldn't recommend doing this as a defense particularly often. It is really if you're playing against something that you think is going to sit back and you need to chase into the opponent's half, because quick snap can potentially cause you a lot of problems here. I've put players 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players open that if quick snap happens we could be in a lot of trouble. I wanted to include it because it's a defense that I quite like, but it can get you into a lot of trouble against quick snap, possibly not beginner friendly. And then I've gone for this defense. We talked about chevrons a moment ago, where everyone was in the zigzags here and here. Here is an alternate to chevrons, but they're not really chevron. If you think about this from your opponent's point of view, they're going to struggle to get an easy 2 dice blitz on any of your players. Really, they're going to be hitting numbers 3 or 4 because they can't get 2 dice on any of these players. The wide 3 on either side, unless they've got a strength 4 player, or they want to try and come in from this angle here, which leaves them dangerously to the sidelines. This will probably be one of my actual go-to setups in Blood Bowl 3 when you see me play the team, because I believe it provides quite a lot of space to attack into, and it's also a problem for your opponent to get a nice solid turn 1 blitz. Finally, we can just step these players forward a little bit, just as a shape, and then we don't want to leave the blitzers on the outside. We probably actually want to protect the blitzers a little bit by putting them there. That is something, if you watch me play Blood Bowl 2, you'll have seen this shape, and it is another very aggressive variant, and it tries to limit the damage that your line of scrimmage might take by defending them on both sides here. So that's setups. Let's dive into inducements. Hello everyone. Right, let's have a quick look at some inducements if you're a Bretonian team. So let's have a quick look at the star players first of all. We have 3 very good star players, or 2 very good star players first of all. One of the best star players in the game in Griff Overwald at 280k, and one of the reasons he's so good is because we have a combination of movement 7, strength 4, agility 4 in the old money. He can also pass a little bit, and he's AV 9+. However, he's got block, he's also got dodge, so he's blodge, he's got fend, he's got sprint, and he's got sure feet, so effectively he's movement 10. Yes, he's got to roll some 2+s to get there, but he's also got a very strong once per game, which is that you can re-roll any single dice if it fails. So for example, you're dodging away from a player with tackle. Typically Griff wouldn't have dodge. Don't worry, we can re-roll the dodge and it just works. Gromidal is the other one that from a star player point of view is absolutely amazing, because he is a dwarf blitzer with movement 5, strength 3, agility 3, passing 4+, and AD 10. None of that's particularly exciting. However, he has block, he has dauntless, and he has got mighty blow, so he's a block mighty blow player, pretty useful. He's also got stand firm, and he's got thick skull. However, he has got an ability that once per team turn, he can hand one of 5 different skills to one of your players, and those skills include break tackle and mighty blow. So now you can make your blitzer any player you like, and bearing in mind that break tackle now just adds +1 to a dodge roll, and if you're an agility 3 team, which Imperial Nobility are, then pretty much everybody can now dodge away on a 2+ if you really need to move that player. Gromidal is that player that can come and help you. Now, they are both very expensive, and you probably won't be fielding them very much, but they are very good players, and they also will be replacing a human lineman on this team. So I think you should consider star players as one of the go-to places to look at. Barrack Farblast, he's okay, but at 80k, and I believe he's got Dirty Player. Which one's that one? Secret Weapon, there we go. He's only going to last one drive, and I wouldn't really be looking to pick him up. I think there are better things in the rest of the inducement screen. So, having a quick look at the inducement screen, a bribe is 100k. It's okay, it's pretty solid. You will hopefully be rostering a Dirty Player sneaky kit, so bribes are okay. The wizard, still fine. You are now probably looking at using the fireball in most cases now, so it's a little bit less reliable than it was previously, but it's a pretty solid inducement, and if I had less than 150k thereabouts, I'd be looking to pick that up. And then one that we haven't covered anywhere else in this guide video, and that's biased referee. If you think your opponent is going to be fouling, then consider a biased referee, because it will get that player's kicked out around about a third of the time, which will make a big difference to keeping your players on the field. So a biased referee is a pretty good inducement against certain teams. That covers inducements, and ultimately I think the roundup here is, if you can get one of those 2-star players, you should. If you can't, pick up a wizard. If you can't get that, it's probably a bribe. In certain situations, look at the biased referee. Now, I hope this guide video overall has been really helpful. I will be streaming Blood Bowl. I will be playing all of the teams at the launch of Blood Bowl 3. If you'd like to come and see me, do come and check out AndyDavo/TwitchTV. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and maybe a comment in the section below, and let me know what you thought of the video. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time.